What's up guys, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to look at what I've learned after playing Sorare for 6 months. But before we get started, I want to thank you all for being here and apologise for my lack of uploads over the last few weeks. I took a break from making these videos for a while because I was busy with real life things. And as some of you might know, it takes quite a bit of time and effort to make this kind of content when you have other commitments. My videos take a lot of planning and execution, and it's a significant time sink, especially when I do everything from the writing, editing and designing the graphics myself. I've also truthfully not been in the best headspace mentally, so while I was still playing and enjoying Sorare, I found it hard to motivate myself to make videos when I was struggling with my own mental health. That being said, I'm glad to be back here and appreciate you all for asking where I've been and when the next video will be. So for those of you who are subscribed, welcome back. I've got plenty of Sorare content planned to come over the next few months. And if you're new to the channel and enjoy this video, I hope you consider liking and subscribing too. Now with that out of the way, today we're going to look back at my first 6 months on the game, what I've learned, what I've liked, and what I'd suggest to new and old players alike. And let me know what you've learned from playing Sorare since you started. And if any of these points I discussed today raise questions or comments, leave me one below and I'll be sure to respond. Alright, let's get stuck in with one of the first things I've learned over the last 6 months, and that is play what you know. If you're starting out or feeling stuck, I will always come back to this point. Play with players and leagues that you actually know and like. If your knowledge only really covers Europe's top 5 leagues, use Champion Europe as your base. Some of the rare cards may well be out of your budget, in which case stick to limiteds. If the MLS is what you know best, play that. If the SPL or Austrian or Belgian leagues are your jam, play those first and then look to expand. It always takes time to learn and understand regions and players you're not familiar with, and buying players who simply look like good scorers or are cards you see others playing with is not the best approach. You need to know yourself why you're picking and playing the cards you are, and being able to watch those players is a huge benefit. Of course, doing your research is a big part of the game, but I can speak from my experience and say I've always felt most comfortable playing SO5 when I've been playing what I know. Personally, when I started 6 months ago, I played with almost exclusively limited Champ Europe cards because that was my main knowledge base. It's what I knew best and what I was mostly able to watch, and that brought relative success. But conversely, when I made changes and started to play with cards in regions I wasn't as familiar with, I had less connection to the players, less knowledge of the team situations, and was just generally less successful as a result. If you take a look at my gallery currently, you'll see it's completely focused on the Asian region, and this didn't happen overnight. I would say it's taken a good 2 or 3 months of actually following, watching, and familiarizing myself with both the J-League and K-League to gain what I would call a passable knowledge of each team, the standout players, and the favorable matchups. Learning new regions takes time and patience, but being in a region where the Asian games are on at suitable times for me aided the learning process tremendously. Never did I think when I joined Sorare that I'd be watching as many Japanese and Korean games as I have, but it's one of the great things about this platform. It gives you the incentive to venture out and expand your football knowledge like you perhaps never have before. So playing what you know and understand is big on Sorare, and if you feel like you need to learn more of a particular league or region, it will take time. But that brings me on to my next point, and that is you really need to learn the scoring matrix. Sorare has its own unique scoring matrix, and the best way to know how and why players are scoring what they're scoring is to watch and follow along in real time. Seeing how a player scores historically and after the fact is one thing, but really understanding how each action they take on the pitch translates positively or negatively to the SO5 scoring matrix is really important when thinking about future matchups and how you want to run your lineups. So investing into seeing how the scoring matrix works in real time is well worth it, and something I'd highly recommend for new players. One of the next things I've learned is that depth is important. This is something you either learn early or learn the hard way, and that is the depth of your gallery relative to the divisions you want to focus on is important. As nice as it may seem to plug 5 top cards into concepts and imagine how many rewards you'll rake in, that isn't really how the game works. Spreading your resources too thin is a mistake, and therefore picking up depth pieces in a division is vital. Not only does it allow you to account for injuries and suspensions, but it allows you to select lineups based on matchups. This is still a side of the game that even experienced players can fall foul of, and it's understandable. The allure of picking up big and more powerful cards at the expense of depth is something many of us have done, and while it may work in the short term, it often has detrimental effect in the long run. I would personally much rather sacrifice a lineup and run 2 well matched up teams instead of 3 compromised teams, and that is what having depth gives you the option to do. Constructing a gallery that allows you to switch cards in and out of regions is extremely beneficial because then you aren't 1 or 2 injuries away from a completely dead team. So gallery depth is something I and many others have made mistakes with in the past, and will most likely make them again in the future, but it's something something I've certainly paid more attention to over the last few months. The next thing I've learned is don't be afraid to take profits. Oftentimes it's hard to let go of a card who's perhaps hit a rich vein of form. Their L5 is a sky-high dark green and their price has doubled, but arguably that is a great time to sell. Lots of managers in that scenario buy into the hype with the fear of missing out on a great player, but you have to remain level-headed as a card holder and remind yourself that natural variance is going to take hold at some point, and this player's scores may return to the mean. Sure, there are cases where those high scores become the new normal, but those are usually exceptions to the rule. If you're looking at big profits on a card, make sure you actually realize them. It helps to look at alternative investments before you make a sale, so you have a clear plan of where you might want to reallocate those funds to. If you're in a card for the long haul, it's a different story, but for those Sorare managers looking to progress their galleries, I think taking profits from good pickups is an important part of building a gallery. When you decide to buy and sell a card is ultimately up to you, but it is valuable to sit down and analyze your cards sometimes and ask yourself if there's any profit to be taken in the short to mid-term. The next thing I've learned is lean on the community. Sorare has a great community of people who are willing to help and advise you along the way, whether it's through predicted lineups, transfer rumors, Sorare related podcasts, or even just Twitter posts. Most of you will have come across a knowledgeable and helpful bunch of people within our community. And don't be afraid to lean on them, ask for advice or opinions. Taking in as many sources of information as possible is something I would always recommend, and it definitely applies to Sorare. Another thing I've learned is that you will make mistakes. You will make plenty of mistakes, so try not to beat yourself up about them. There will always be a game week where you could have played a certain player over another and perhaps won a reward. There will be players you could have bought and didn't, and some you did buy and shouldn't have. Your decisions will always be easier to pick holes in hindsight, but something I've definitely learned is to try and let go of your mistakes. Accept that they can and will happen, and that all you can do is to try and learn from them and move on to the next game week or the next card and try not to look back. One of the other things I've learned the hard way is that patience is a virtue. Sorare is often a game of patience and timing, whether you're negotiating a deal with another player on Discord or waiting for your plans for future game weeks to roll around. Patience is something I'd try and preach to any new manager. There's nothing worse than FOMO to ultimately lead you down the wrong path. If a card isn't listed at a price you'd like or isn't around their true valuation, there's no need to rush. Overpaying is something pretty much all of us have done and regretted afterwards. There's always a feeling of I need to get this card to make my strategy work, but if you actually take a step back and assess, perhaps there's 2 or 3 other options that fit your play if you really think about it. Most of us who play SO5 want to compete, but if you've developed and executed on a strategy and a clear plan, be patient and try not to abandon it if it falls on the first few hurdles. Remind yourself why you've decided to run the lineups you have in the divisions you have, and before making any rash decisions, just take a moment and ask whether you should perhaps be a little more patient before you make any big moves. You'll thank me later for that one. The penultimate thing I've learned playing Sorare is that the highs are high and the lows are low. There's nothing worse than finding out the lineup you had the biggest hopes for this weekend is now killed by an injury in the warm-up to your star man, or watching your defensive stack crumble and lose their clean sheet in second half stoppage time. There's really no other way to describe that pure disappointment of what could have been. It just sucks. On the flip side, the thrill you feel when your lineup smashes it and you're sitting pretty in the rankings is perhaps why so many of us look forward to the next game week. Knowing you've created and run a lineup that just works to a T is exhilarating, and there's nothing quite like it. There's also an equal thrill that comes with picking up an undervalued card and seeing his price skyrocket as he returns to form or bags a couple of goals in quick succession. You knew in your gut he was a solid pickup, and it's proven true. And on the flip side, nothing stings quite as much as seeing your most expensive player limp off holding his hamstring 10 minutes into a game. That's why I'd say the highs are high and the lows are low when it comes to playing SO5. But like many of you, I'm sure, it's why I've learned to enjoy the game as much as I do. And the final thing I've learned about this game after 6 months is that Sorare itself is far from perfect. After being on the platform and engaging with the community for this period of time, it's clear that Sorare still has a good way to go to achieve its full potential. It's nice to see the free-to-play aspect getting a bit of a revamp with more rewards, something that makes sense and was much needed. The new game lobby is hit and miss, and I still think the card designs have a way to go to be more appealing on the eye as genuine collector items. If we can get cards with dynamic images to rival physical cards like Topps and Panini, and digital cards similar to FIFA and 2K, we'll be heading in the right direction a lot faster. In terms of SO5, I think there could be some minor tweaks to the scoring matrix to balance out some aspects of the scoring that are either too harsh or too lenient. And of course, the division rewards could be reworked to incentivize progression and reflect fairness, because as things stand, there's not much incentive to progress past the rare pro divisions. I am, however, a big fan of the underdog and specialist leagues, so let's hope we see more positive steps in regards to that during the second half of the year. Sorare is far from a perfect product at the moment, but I'm optimistic that improvements will continue to be made over the coming weeks and months. So that just about rounds out what I've learned during my first 6 months on Sorare. Play what you know, learn the ins and outs of the SO5 scoring matrix, don't forget how important gallery depth is, don't be afraid to take profits on your cards, lean on and utilize the Sorare community, realize that you will make mistakes, Try to have patience, understand that the highs are high and the lows are low, and Sorare itself, while headed in the right direction, is far from perfect. Let me know if there's anything you think I missed in the comments below. If you found this useful or just a good reminder, leave me a like and subscribe for more. Again, apologies for the lack of uploads. I'm back in the swing of making content now, and I can't wait for this international break to be over and for club football to be back. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll catch you next time.